welcome to our annual Mother's Day episode here at Movies You Missed Podcast.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Susan. Hi, Moms.
This is the episode where John and I's moms pick the movies that we will discuss this week.
Yeah.
We started doing this tradition last year, and it went so well, we gave our moms a chance to pick another movie this year.
Yeah. And lo and behold, they both chose movies written and directed by the same man.
Yes, apparently moms love George Clooney.
Who doesn't?
A surprise to no one, right?
Yeah.
The only man who could pull off a Caesar haircut, including Caesar himself. We are talking about films written, directed, and starring George Clooney this week. And John, how are you feeling about this episode?
I'm feeling pretty good. I haven't seen your mom's pick in a long time. I saw it in theaters at a small theater in Santa Monica. Really enjoyed it. And then it came out, and it was one of those movies that I wrestled with myself. Like, do I own this one? It's a really interesting piece of history. Everything that really goes down in this movie. But it's not one that I actually gravitated enough to own. I have seen it, though, at least 4 or 5 times. So this might be the 5th or 6th time seeing this particular movie. And we'll get into it.
And in a Movies You Missed First, I haven't seen either of these movies before.
Yes, that's right. I actually had not seen my mother's pick either, so it's going to be fun. We both went into, well, you at least went into both blind. I went into one of them blind.
Yes, so I'm very much looking forward to our discussion and a little bit about these films. And before we get into that, welcome everyone to our very special Mother's Day episode. We are John and V and love to discuss movies without spoiling them.
No spoilers.
And thankfully our moms did not spoil their movies for us this week either.
Exactly, yes.
And besides discussing the picks of the week, we always love to discuss the new movies we've seen in theaters or on streaming.
Oh yes, one of my favorite parts.
Well, let's not wait any longer then. John, what did you see this week?
I don't think we should wait any longer either, V. I went and saw the new Josh Hartnett flick, also starring Charithra Chandran. This is Fight or Flight.
Yes, we both saw this movie this week.
Yes, we did, and I'm very curious what you thought, but I guess I will start because I kind of let you take the reins on The Accountant 2 a week or two ago.
Fair.
I absolutely had a complete and utter blast with this movie. I laughed my entire ass off. It's brutal, it's bloody, but it's a lot of fucking fun, and I thought Josh Hartnett was absolutely fantastic, as was the supporting cast of this entire flick.
I agree with you for the most part. I had a lot of fun. I think it went a little bit off the rails in the last 20 minutes or so of the movie. I think it tried to do a little too much with the script, but overall, Josh Hartnett was the best person to be cast in that role. I loved him so much. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, he was so great.
This is the spiritual sequel to Bullet Train.
Absolutely. 100% agree.
It was great to see it in theaters, a very entertaining action movie. And you're right, the whole cast was great.
Awesome. I'm glad you had a good time with it. I would say it's on a could-miss list.
Definitely.
It's definitely not a must-see.
No.
But I definitely had a good time, and I would very likely go see it again.
I would too. It was entertaining as hell.
Awesome. Fight or flight, good time.
And it's so good to see Josh Hartnett back on the big screen.
It really is, and I loved just the absolute out-of-control everything of this movie. So yeah, big fan. Big time, good time fan.
Yes.
I'm a good time, big time fan.
Perfect descriptor for this crazy movie.
And Steve went and saw it too, and he texted me after he saw it, and he goes, "That movie was messed up." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's really fucking twisted."
It's a wild ride.
It is absolutely.
Well, once again, we saw the same movie in a week. I always love when that happens.
Oh yeah, same.
And I'm really excited for the rest of the month, including an upcoming themed episode.
Hell yeah.
Well, all right, we've waited long enough, and so have our mothers. John, do you want to get into the picks this week?
Why not? Sounds like fun to me.
I believe you go first.
I think you're right.
All right, let's do it.
Alrighty, and again, just like last week, we are not going in chronological order since my movie came out a few years after the pick that Susan, V's mother, chose.
However, we are in chronological order in terms of the storylines.
That's true, actually. Solid point. Then let's start with mine. Set during World War II, this film did come out in 2014. This movie is based on a true story. This is written by Robert M. Edsel, Grant Heslov, and George Clooney. This film is directed by George Clooney. This film also stars George Clooney, Matt Damon, Bill Murray, John Goodman, Hugh Bonneville, Bob Balaban, and Kate Blanchett. This is The Monuments Men. And like I said before, I had never seen this movie. I did, however, start it several years ago. My buddy Joel and I, when we were living together, we got super stoned and decided to put this movie on.
Your
And
mother's
about
listening.
Yeah, I've smoked weed with my mom. I put this movie on, and I was about 10 minutes into it, and I was not into it at all. And we turned it off, and I never went back to give it another shot. So I was glad that my mom actually chose it, because not only did that happen, but I've had a DVD copy in my possession for the last several years. There's a record store in town that has mystery grab bags, and they're $2.99, and there's either movies, video games, or CDs in them. I always go for the movies, and The Monuments Men was in one of those grab bags. So I decided to keep it and one day watch it, and that day has now come.
Yay!
So yay indeed. And I was glad that my mom chose it, because it is a movie that I have been wanting to see. I like George Clooney's work. I did not, however, like his last Netflix movie. I thought it was terrible. And I also was not the biggest fan of Ticket to Paradise, or Wolves. So I guess over the last few years, I haven't actually really enjoyed much of Clooney's work. That doesn't mean I don't like the guy. I still like majority of his stuff. We've done Burn After Reading on this show. I love that movie. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou was a great movie as well. I am going to likely choose more movies with him in it. I am a fan of Up in the Air. I liked Michael Clayton. Mm-hmm. The list goes on.
Yeah, I agree with you. It feels like he's been phoning it in the last couple years.
Yeah, that's absolutely what it felt like.
Which is fair. He's been acting for 30 plus years. He's got kids now. I get it, but he doesn't need the money, so maybe he just needs to take a break.
Yeah, I don't think it would hurt. A lot of directors do that. So let's break down The Monuments Men a little bit. Like I mentioned before, this is based on a true story. This movie is set during World War II. We are introduced to Frank Stokes. George Clooney plays this gentleman. He is making a presentation to the president and a general about how the Third Reich has been destroying a lot of museums and a lot of very old classic architecture throughout Europe. And if these things continues to happen, then all of these old buildings that are full of rich history, including artwork and museums, will be lost in the destruction of the war. And a lot of art is starting to go missing. So what he proposes is building a squadron of military men and women to go into Europe and steal back all of this art that the Nazis are hoarding for themselves. We ultimately find out that Hitler has been wanting to build the Führer Museum in Austria, and that is where he plans to put all of these magnificent pieces of art. So Stokes gets the go-ahead to do such a thing. He recruits James Granger, played by Matt Damon, and then both of these two gentlemen, Stokes and Granger, go across the United States and Europe and start to collect all of these gentlemen. These men are architects, they are curators, and they are a bunch of art historians, and start to figure out a way to go from Normandy through Europe up through Poland and France and Germany to start collecting these pieces of art that have been stolen by the Third Reich. We're also introduced to Cate Blanchett. She plays Claire Simone. She has actually got her foot really in the door with the Nazis, because she is a secretary at one of the buildings where some of these guys are hoarding some of this art that they are about to take over to Austria to put into the very soon to be built Führer Museum. And after we are introduced to Claire Simone and everybody that Stokes and Granger band together with, we are treated to a very interesting story of these men that go off on their own. They split up in twos. They go across Europe and they try and figure out where this art is being hidden so that they can steal it back and restore it to its rightful owners and where it originally was stolen from. So like the Louvre and all these other museums and a whole bunch of Jewish families that were also owners of a lot of these pieces of art and statues. It's a very fascinating story. I remember seeing the trailer for it, and like I said, started it one day, but I just couldn't get into it. And this time around, I kind of felt that way still in the first 10 minutes, but I think I still held on to that kind of weird resentment that I had the first time I watched it. As the movie continued on, I really started to get a understanding as to what really was going on with the quote-unquote monuments men and how they were able to figure out in which certain cities a lot of this art was being hidden, how they were able to find it, how they were able to coax certain Third Reich members into completely outing themselves. And I had a good time with it. There's definitely a lot of very entertaining, funny moments. John Goodman is fantastic in this movie. There's also a lot of very intense moments. I got quite choked up a couple of times. And I enjoyed it. I would give it like a B-. I don't think it's one of my favorite movies I've ever seen, but it's definitely an important piece of cinema and an important piece of history, because had these guys never existed, like we see in the movie, the Nazis got rid of a lot of art because they did not want them being seized by us, by the U.S. That was also under Hitler being like, no, fuck the U.S. Let's just destroy this so that nobody can have it. If I can't have it, nobody can, basically.
Such a child.
And, Absolutely, yeah. And we also find out, which I should have mentioned before, Hitler was a very, very big appreciator of art because he was a failed art student when he was a very young man in Austria. And I remember reading that about him when I was reading a book years ago called The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, which is one of the biggest books I ever read. It was almost like 2,000 pages, and it went from the birth of Hitler all the way up until when they found him in the Eagle's Nest.
Jesus.
And it was an absolutely insane piece of literature and history to read, and I'm really grateful that I was able to read that. I read that when I was about 16. Like that was
Nice
I was
work.
I was a massive war history buff from about 13 to about 24. I'm more into horror and science fiction now as I'm getting older, but I still also really enjoy reading history. So again, really happy to have watched this movie. I thought my mom picked a great one, especially with the pairing of Susan, your mother's pick. I think it's
not believe the serendipitous nature of those picks.
Yeah, so this is actually another one of our based on true story episodes, so that was really cool. So yeah, Mom, great job, great movie, very entertaining and also very intense, and I'm glad to have seen it, glad to know about it. So I'm curious, V, what you thought about it on your first go around.
I was very excited to watch this film, especially because I own the book, and I have been meaning to read it for as many years as I've owned the book, and I need to lend it to you after I'm done, too. Or before,
Please
either
do.
way. I was shocked to see Cate Blanchett, first and foremost, because I thought this was just a male ensemble cast that George Clooney had brought together. So it was really nice to see her in the film. She did a great job playing a French woman. And so when she's in that building, helping to catalog all the art that's being stolen, and that big fat Nazi walks in,
Yes.
my first thought was, these guys never look like the master race.
I know, right? I know.
They
never do.
These white supremacists or Ku Klux Klansmen in the United States, and they're these single-digit IQ Neanderthals whose family tree is basically a bush. These guys are not the masters of literally anything.
Just drag their knuckles as they walk through life.
Exactly. They're not pinnacles of physical prowess in any way.
No,
not
at all.
Dickheads. And so that was my first thought when watching the first scene of this movie. But anyway, moving on from that, I do agree with you. I love John Goodman in this movie.
So good.
Love him so much in everything.
I know, it's really difficult to not like John Goodman. If he's in the movie, you're guaranteed a good time, at least with his character.
Absolutely, and the Monuments Men was no exception. And when they're assembling their team, I love that there's a physical, and not only is the patient smoking a cigarette, but so is the doctor.
Oh,
and
that
he's
was
listening
so
to his
great.
lungs.
Yeah,
like,
Hugh
right.
Bonneville. He plays Donald Jeffries. He's been in so many things. He's actually the father in the Paddington movies, but he's been around for a long time. He's a great character actor.
Yes, I recognize everybody in this movie, and Hugh Bonneville, when he's talking to George Clooney and when they're at the airfield, and he says, "Hey man, you look really good," and Hugh goes, "Thanks, I'm on the wagon." And George Clooney's asked, "Oh, since when?" 9 a.m. this morning?
9 a.m. I love that part too. So good.
You need to use that line on me every once in a while, I think.
I loved the whole interaction between Richard Campbell and Preston Savitz. That was Bob Balaban and Bill Murray. I love that they put them together.
Yes.
Because when they're in that tent on the airfield and Stokes is giving them all the information along with Granger, their back and forth is so great, and it just gets better from there.
The combination of Bob Balaban and Bill Murray, I totally agree with you. Great decision. And when they're in the mine later on at that table, oh my God, so good. They were great together.
I love that.
Great chemistry.
So fantastic.
And George Clooney.
So I guess I like this movie a little bit more than I thought. I'm sorry. Talking about it, because when it ended, I was like, that was good. But now I'm talking about it, I'm like, this movie's actually pretty fucking good. Like, this is a very well put together flick.
It's certainly funnier than I thought, especially when Matt Damon was trying to speak French the whole time.
Oh, that was amazing. Yes.
Parisian and Frenchman is like, dude, speak English.
Yeah.
Which is...
Amy was watching it with me, and she was like, he's terrible at French. I'm like, I think that's obviously the point. But yeah, the subtitles were great.
But it's funny because when I was in Paris, that is the exact words that were used on me. I was literally told to just speak English.
That's funny.
Okay, I'm sorry. I tried. So yes, I had a good time with this movie. I've heard and read a lot of reviews by viewers on social media and different websites that it was a mediocre film, and I went in there with those kinds of expectations. I do think it suffers a little bit from editing and it needs a little bit of script doctoring because the story meanders a bit.
A little bit, yeah. I will agree with you on the editing, and I think that's why I didn't like the first 10 minutes the first time I saw it. The way, just for whatever reason, it lacked in, I don't want to say urgency, but there was a little bit of
no, it's urgency
going on.
You are absolutely right. I've been looking for this word for like a day and a half since I watched this film, and I was trying to think. I wrote down it lacked spark, that it lacked punch, it didn't have the impact it was looking for, especially with a story like this. And that's what it is. There's no sense of urgency in this film, even though they're racing against time and Nazis to save all this art.
Right.
And so that's why I thought maybe there was an editing issue.
Yeah, it's possible.
Maybe the script lacked a North Star because there wasn't as much tension as I expected. Even though they're put in perilous positions, I never felt stress for any of these men.
Yeah, that's a solid point, too. I really didn't. There was one moment where I did, and it was when Balaban leaves the room, and then Bill Murray catches him outside against the tree. That moment for sure. But then there were two other moments where I was kind of like, for whatever reason, it just felt too easy.
Yes,
you know?
exactly.
Like it was kind of like, what's going on here?
It felt like a foregone conclusion.
Yeah. But putting both of those moments aside, it's still a very well put together flick. I can completely agree with you on that.
But there are several scenes that I really loved beyond the ones we've already talked about. First of all, at the warehouse when Cate Blanchett brings Matt Damon in and they're discussing what they're looking at. And I thought that was an incredibly impactful piece of dialogue.
Yeah, that was good.
And then the other is when they're in one of the mines and there's a giant 50-gallon drum and it's little pieces of gold from people's teeth.
Yeah, that was nuts.
As well as the scene from the farmhouse, which kind of reminded me of Inglourious Basterds just flipped.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
100%. Yes.
Yeah. And so there were some great scenes in this movie. There's, as we've discussed, very funny dialogue. It's not a bad film. I'd give it a C+. And it made me really excited to read the book. So it certainly inspired me and made me happy to watch it. And so I'm not upset about the pick. I'm very happy she picked it. And we both finally got an opportunity to watch it because it's been on my list for years and years and years because it has a great ensemble cast. I was really curious about the storyline, even though I'd heard mixed reviews. So I'm very happy I watched it.
Sweet. Glad to hear it. So the name of this movie, The Monuments Men, the actual number of people that were involved in The Monuments Men was a group of men and women of over 340 people.
Whoa!
They were mostly volunteered people that had expertise, like I said before, historians, architects, and museum curators. The job description was very simple: to protect culture, treasures, so far as war allowed. And that's a pretty powerful statement.
It really is, and this movie, I forgot to mention this part, reminded me of when in 2016 I traveled to Germany, and in Berlin, there's a place called Museum Island. It houses 5 different museums, and there is some incredible art in those museums, and similar to the British Museum and a lot of colonial countries, most of the art's stolen, and throughout this movie, I was reminded of how much theft really happened beyond all of the death and destruction, which is obviously more important. But below that is this theft of culture, and the Italy and the Vatican has tons of stolen art, also from World War II and lots of other times and places as well. But I'm actually bringing my father to Germany for the first time in October of this year.
Awesome.
And one of the things we're going to do is visit a lot of World War II monuments and museums, as well as those museums in Berlin. So it was a reminder to me about the history and journey that so much of this art has taken.
For sure. And it really makes me want to go back to Munich and Berlin because I've been to both before. It was back in 2005. And I've been to several museums in Munich and in Berlin, even been to the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin, which is extremely powerful stuff. And now that I've seen this movie and know a little bit more about it, I have very detailed memories of being in both cities, but I don't remember a lot of the museums because back then I was still maturing and was like, oh, museum, okay. But it was still cool to see see some of this stuff. Now, of course, I'm like, well, shit, like this was 20 years ago now, and I would really love to actually go there with the understanding of where a lot of this art actually might have come from and see it secondhand again and kind of sink my teeth back into a lot of the history of World War II that way. So now that I'm closer to 40 and farther away from 30, I'd actually really like to go back to Munich and Berlin and check out a lot of the art in these museums and see if there's a placard that's like, recovered by the Monuments Men or recovered by Stokes or Granger or any of these people's names, now that I know who they are.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the book might give us more details as far as a postscript to the movie.
Yes.
In terms of what happened after that.
Absolutely. There was an article that was written in December of 2013. The police had broken into this flat of this guy named Cornelius Gurlitt. He was the son of a Nazi art dealer who hoarded hundreds of works that had been looted by the Third Reich. Gurlitt had been the focus of a lot of media attention around the time that this happened because in his flat he had over 1,400 previously unknown masterpieces that were seized by the Third Reich during World War II.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
First of all, how big was that flat?
Right? I would love to know. There's no room on the walls anymore.
No, not at all, and he needs a storage unit. But beyond that, remembering Nazis stole all of this art and jewelry and cash and gold from Jewish families while they were escorting them out of Germany to murder them.
Exactly. Garbage.
Again, dicks.
Yep. During the process of finding all this stuff, they were able to find 590 pictures that were also looted and extorted by the Nazis from Jewish collectors. A lot of the pieces included Pablo Picasso, Henri Matisse, Edvard Munch, and Paul Cézanne, and so many others as well out of the 1,400. So that's a lot of art.
Yes.
That this son of a bitch was hoarding in his flat in München. So I'm curious, since I've been to Munich, if I even walked by this place.
Well, and I read an article once about how much lost art is now in private collections. And I always think about that when driving in either a really rich neighborhood or conversely, when I'm out in the sticks or driving through little towns in America, thinking, how many people here have basements with torture chambers?
Right. Well, that was, I think, one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when Bill Murray and Bill Balaban's character go to that cottage when Bill Murray's they're at the dentist, and he's like, oh, my nephew has a bunch of art. Why don't I take you to his house? And they end up finding out that he's got stolen art from Rothschild, and the guy's like trying to play it off like he doesn't know anything. And then they both say Hail Hitler, and his kids are like, Hail Hitler! And then Bill Murray's got the gun. He's like, Hail Hitler! And like, let's go, you son of a bitch.
Such a good
We got
scene.
you this time.
Yeah.
I loved it. So great. Just, it was great stuff. In 2020, in Taylor, Michigan, Motoko Huthwaite was one of the last Monuments women to actually pass away.
I am sad they didn't cast more women in this film if the Monuments Men had that many people in it, first and foremost, but also allowed women to volunteer too. It's last week we were talking about how there are movies that just cast one woman in the entire thing. And funny enough, the Monuments Men is one of them, yeah.
And as much as I love Cate Blanchett, it could have been somebody else.
Don't even. Stop right there.
No?
She's great.
No?
No.
She was great. But she's not French.
No, she's not. No, it could have been a lot of people. You know who would have been really cool? I think it was 10 years ago, so she might have been a little too old for the part. No knocking that, just in terms of what that character did throughout the movie. Yeah. Jodie Foster. She's fluent French.
That would have been cool. That would have been really cool.
But yes, I mean, Audrey Tautou, there are several French actresses who we've talked about several times on the podcast, including the women who starred in Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which
I was just going to say, Noémie Merlan would have been awesome.
She would have been amazing in that role.
She would have been great.
Yeah, that would have been great casting.
And again, nothing against Blanchett. I'm a massive Blanchett fan, but I was kind of like, out of everybody. Anyway,
you persuaded me.
Awesome. But let's get back to Motoko Huthwaite. She was born Motoko Fujishiro in August of 1927 in Boston, and she went back to Japan during the war to become bilingual, and she volunteered for the Monuments Women, and she was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal in 2015 for her work as a Monuments woman.
Very cool.
Very, very cool. The film takes place in 1943, 44, 45, and fast forwards to 1977. The 1977 scene was cool. It was kind of, in my opinion, somewhat of a nod to Saving Private Ryan, if you will.
Yes, it was a bit useless, though. I think a title card instead, talking a little bit more about what happened afterwards, would have been much more impactful.
I agree, and it's funny, too, thinking about when I was watching this movie, especially World War II movies or World War I movies, I like the title card thing after all the action is over, because it gives you a second to really kind of absorb it more than seeing it on screen. So I completely agree with you. I think a title card would have been great. Like one or two, just like Frank Stokes and Granger and all of them, the amount of art that they actually were able to seize. All right, let's get a little bit into the BTS of the movie. Now, I don't have a lot, which is okay because this is based on a true story film and based on the book, and I was glad to actually find some really interesting information about certain people that were involved in this or, related to people that were involved in this. Let's go back to our good pal John Goodman. He said that this is one of the most fun films that he ever got to make, and I will have to agree that he looked like he was having nothing but a blast.
He really did, and I agree. Anytime I was able to get into some cool period costumes for work were my favorite days on set.
I have been a part of projects where there is period accurate wardrobe, and I've always liked getting the background ready or watching cast get into their wardrobe and kind of get into character, and it's very cool. It's the fact that they were able to pull it off so well in this movie. I definitely applaud them for.
Yes, I agree.
This movie was originally slated for a December 2013 release because we all know towards the end of every year, that's when the Oscar nominations and whatnot start to really come out.
Yes, and even though this never, ever would have been considered an Oscar contender, I'm not sure if George Clooney thought the same way as I, but it just seems like a good family movie at Christmas when your grandparents are visiting.
Yeah.
You have some older guys there, and let's go to the movies where we can try to see if everyone can be entertained. I think it's a perfect December release.
I completely agree. It was pushed a few months because George Clooney actually asked the studio for a little bit more time in post-production because of visual effects not being ready. And he knew that this would make it almost impossible for the movie to be considered for Oscar buzz or even Golden Globes. And I think, like you said, I think he did the right thing. It is a good movie, but nothing in the movie when it ended was like, that could have been nominated for such and such,
Even Golden Globes, I don't think it would have been
No, definitely not. I don't think so. No, and that's kind of it's reminded me somewhat fell along the lines of Ocean's 11 and Ocean's 13. Just the feel of this movie, especially with Matt Damon and George Clooney in the movie, and what they're trying to accomplish was very Oceans-ish.
Yeah, you're right. Just set in World War II.
Yeah. One of the final Monuments men, Richard Morton Baranick. He was the final one to pass away. He was born on October 19th of 1924. He passed away on July 14th of 2023, and in 2015, he was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, similar to Motoko Hothwaite. So that was actually pretty cool and somewhat serendipitous. He lived till 2023. That's pretty impressive.
That's very impressive, but it also reminds me that most people in World War II were very, very young. And
yes,
the guys that played these characters were not, although they were museum curators. Maybe it was a selection of the older gentlemen from the Monuments Men, considering there were over 300 to choose from.
Oh, yes.
But yes, these guys were in charge of, they literally had the weight of the world on their shoulders, and they were 20.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts to think about. It's still depicted very well in a lot of war movies, especially in World War I, like 1917, or All Quiet on the Western Front, even Saving Private Ryan, even Black Hawk Down. Black Hawk Down, all of those soldiers are in their 20s too. And I don't even want to pretend to understand.
And there is one scene in this movie where there's a bunch of prisoners of war from Germany being held by Allied soldiers, and they're all kids because they're all Hitler Youth. They were all required to sign up. And by 1944, 1945, Germany was getting kind of desperate, and so they were drafting literally everyone they could. And so many of them were kids.
Yep. There's that scene with Goodman and Jean-Claude where they're in that little town and there's a sniper trying to get at them, and then Jean-Claude runs up in there and it ends up being like this 11-year-old boy. And you can't even imagine what that would be like, even on both sides, being Jean-Claude's character or being that child. And just, I don't even want to nightmares for life, really.
Great scene. I'm glad they depicted it that way because it was
Same.
perfectly accurate.
Oh, yeah. This film came out February 7th of 2014. The budget for this movie, V, I'm curious what you think the budget for Monuments Men was.
I wouldn't be surprised if this film was $100 million.
Oh, you're close. You were $30 million off. It was a $70 million budget.
Shit, my first guess was 60.
You would have been closer. But still close enough. This film was shot all over England and Germany. They did go to practical locations to depict Germany. They didn't do it somewhere on a backlot or anything like that, so hats off to the production and the studio for that. Opening weekend for Monuments Men brought in $22 million. The domestic box office gross was a very sad $78 million.
Yeah, I remember this movie not doing very well.
As do I. The worldwide gross, though, was $156.7 million, so it did fairly well worldwide, so you can't really knock it for that. We both agree it is an entertaining movie. It's just not something that is an overwhelming masterpiece, if you will.
Yes, I didn't walk away from that movie going, oh, I'm going to remember it forever.
Right. But still very good.
Yeah, but still entertaining.
Well, I'm glad we agree on that. I'm glad that my mom chose this movie so we could both check it out, and I'm very glad that I was able to enjoy it. So thanks, Mom, for choosing The Monuments Men. Screenplay again, George Clooney, Grant Heslov, Robert M. Edsel. The book was written by Brett Witter, and the film is directed by George Clooney. If you care to check it out, if you have not, it is currently streaming on Netflix. Like I said, I watched my DVD copy. So now I think it's time to go back in time a little bit and hang out with George Clooney again for Susan's pick, V's mom. V, are you ready to jump into broadcasting?
Absolutely, and once again, thanks, Terry, for picking that film. It's been on my list for a really long time, and I'm glad I finally got a chance to watch it.
Hell yeah! All right, V, take it away on your mother's pick this week.
Yes, let's go back to 2005 to a movie that George Clooney also wrote and directed. He wrote it with Grant Heslov, too. But the story of this movie, which is also based on a true story, actually takes place about 10 years after yours.
Yes.
In the 1950s. This movie is titled Good Night and Good Luck. Another movie that's been on my to-watch list for many years. The plot of this movie focuses on McCarthyism. This is about Joseph McCarthy. He's a senator from Wisconsin back in the 1950s, and he ran the House on Un-American Activities. Basically, the long and short of it was Joseph McCarthy ran a witch hunt looking for communists in America. And I mean witch hunt in the literal sense because, like the Salem witch trials, where witch hunt was first coined, McCarthy and his goons would accuse people of communism or being un-American and being unpatriotic, because this was during the Cold War, after World War II, without any evidence whatsoever, and just being accused and having your neighbors accuse you, or someone at work, or somebody you pissed off. That would basically ruin you. You'd immediately lose your job. Many times people would be put on these awful lists that McCarthy was creating, also for just being gay. It didn't just have to be communism. It was a rough time. It was a very paranoid time. And through years of McCarthy doing this in the Senate and through Senate committee hearings, he actually started to get quite a bit of pushback from the American people, including from some very trusted newsmen, one of them being Edward R. Murrow. He held a very popular news show every night for CBS over the years. He started out being a reporter in World War II, funny enough, and built up his reputation. So a very trusted newsman telling the American people that what McCarthy and his team were doing was un-American, unconstitutional, violated due process. People actually listened because they trusted Edward R. Murrow. So this is the story of Murrow doing just that. Him and his team finally deciding to go after Joseph McCarthy and make public the unconstitutional process he was taking in order to accuse fellow Americans. And I'm back to having movies with stacked casts.
Yes, you are.
Because everyone in this movie you will recognize.
Oh, yeah.
First and foremost, Edward R. Murrow is played by David Strathairn. We love him on this show. He's a great character actor. We recently talked about him in my pick a few months ago with LA Confidential because he was Pierce Patchett, the pimp.
Yep.
Great in that film. And he was George Clooney's first choice to play Edward R. Murrow. George knew he didn't want someone super famous to play the newsman.
Oh, that's a good call.
Yeah, I agree.
Because George Clooney easily could have been like, I'll do it.
Yeah, it's my movie. Why don't I take this?
Or let's get Matt Damon or Brad Pitt or something.
Yeah, one of his buddies. No, instead it was David Strathairn. He was perfect in the role. And do you know that David Strathairn also played Oppenheimer in a movie a few years before that?
Did he really?
He's got the face for it. I could see him pull that off pretty well.
He totally does. Yeah. They actually even mention Oppenheimer in Good Night and Good Luck.
They sure do, which I thought was a really good tie-in to us talking about Oppenheimer all the time on this show because we love it so much.
Yes.
That Edward R. Murrow is slated to interview Oppenheimer next week, is what they say.
Yeah.
And besides David Strathairn, Jeff Daniels is their manager. He really tries to caution them on going down this road because McCarthy's basically going to try to ruin them, and he's got tons of power in Congress, so be careful with that. Frank Langella is the head of the studio. We recognize him. He was a great actor, and he played, funny enough, Nixon in Frost Nixon.
Yeah.
And he's been in a lot of great movies. Robert Downey Jr. is also on his team. Patricia Clarkson works at the station as well. Patricia Clarkson played Emma Stone's mom in Easy A.
Yeah, she did.
Tate Donovan's also in this movie. Again, this cast is very stacked. And
Alex Borstein's in this movie, too.
Yes, there's so many.
I completely forgot when she showed up. I was like, wow, everybody's here.
Yeah, Reed Diamond's in it, too. Again, we recognized every single person in this film. It was great.
Yep.
And it was built on this studio. Everything was shot in a studio, but it was all built in the same soundstage. And so when they would go into an elevator, it would actually turn to go to the next room, and then they opened the doors and could keep shooting.
When I was watching this time around, I'm like, damn, so they're actually in a high-rise building. That's so freaking brilliant.
It is, and I love that because they could have a lot more continuous shots because of it. So great building from the set designer.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of great cinematography in this movie.
There really is, and the cinematographer was Robert Elswit. He had worked with George Clooney in Syriana. And
oh, sweet.
George really liked him and so brought him on board.
Syriana is a movie I've been meaning to revisit ever since I saw it in theaters. My dad and I went and saw it. We were so stoked for it. And I remember it just fell flat because every time I'd see the trailer or a commercial, it would be the scene where George Clooney talks about how if anything were to happen to him, such and such is going to happen to this person. And I think that was like the most impactful scene in the movie. But I got to give it another shot because that one is a stacked cast too.
It really is. And George Clooney through the mid-2010s had a great streak of films. It was that, Michael Clayton, this film. He took some really serious dramatic roles that landed super well. All very good films. And Robert Elswit, the cinematographer for this movie, who George Clooney chose, he was also the cinematographer on The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, The River Wild, funny enough, also with David Strathairn in it, Boogie Nights, Tomorrow Never Dies, Magnolia, Runaway Jury, There Will Be Blood, The Town, Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol, and Rogue Nation.
Oh, snap.
The miniseries The Night Of, and Nightcrawler.
Oh, damn.
Robert
A lot of
Elswit.
past picks and future picks.
Yes, Robert Elswit is a great cinematographer.
Definitely.
So to kick off these news segments that Edward R. Murrow will be doing, the first story that they decide to cover is an Air Force corpsman who had been arrested and put on trial in the military tribunal for being a communist. And the reason why Edward R. Murrow and his team have decided to focus on this man in particular is that they have found out that there is a sealed envelope of quote-unquote evidence that not he nor his lawyer nor the military court saw before they convicted him of being guilty. And they violated his due process because of that, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they start this expose with a bang about Joseph McCarthy and how they are conducting all of these investigations. And the military meeting between George Clooney and these officers is so intense. I really, really like that scene because George Clooney is not backing down. And they were all doing the right thing. I really love this movie because of it. So from there, they take this single case and expand on it and show the American people that this is systematic, that this is a problem, that everybody's due process is being violated, that the Constitution is being violated. And while Edward R. Murrow and his team are going through all the different footage of different hearings that Joseph McCarthy has conducted, at one point, Edward R. Murrow discusses why what they're doing is so important.
Earlier, the senator asked, "Upon what meat does this our Caesar feed?" Had he looked 3 lines earlier in Shakespeare's Caesar, he would have found this line, which is not altogether inappropriate. "The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves." No one familiar with the history of this country can deny that congressional committees are useful. It is necessary to investigate before legislating, but the line between investigating and persecuting is a very fine one, and the junior senator from Wisconsin has stepped over it repeatedly. We must not confuse dissent with disloyalty. We must remember always that accusation is not proof, and that conviction depends upon evidence and due process of law. We will not walk in fear one of another. We will not be driven by fear into an age of unreason if we dig deep in our history and our doctrine, and remember that we are not descended from fearful men, not from men who feared to write, to associate, to speak, and to defend the causes that were for the moment unpopular. This is no time for men who oppose Senator McCarthy's methods to keep silent, or for those who approve. We can deny our heritage and our history, but we cannot escape responsibility for the results. We proclaim ourselves, indeed, as we are, the defenders of freedom wherever it continues to exist in the world, but we cannot defend freedom abroad by deserting it at home. The actions of the junior senator from Wisconsin have caused alarm and dismay amongst our allies abroad, and given considerable comfort to our enemies. And whose fault is that? Not really his. He didn't create this situation of fear. He merely exploited it, and rather successfully. Cassius was right. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. Good night, and good luck.
And the reason why I wanted to play that clip is this was so dangerous for all of them. The threat of being put on these lists themselves, even though there was no evidence and there was no history of them ever being un-American, was always looming over all of their heads. Joseph McCarthy, it totally caught his attention when he was being put on blast on CBS because there was only 3 channels at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And he threatened all of them, and this was all real. I loved that George Clooney decided to not cast an actor as Joseph McCarthy and instead just used real video of the real man to depict him, and he was so goddamn unhinged in real life.
Yeah, he was.
And that was actually feedback in test screenings.
Oh, is that right?
Only 20% of people knew who Joseph McCarthy was, and let's not even get into that sad piece of trivia, but...
Yeah.
A lot of the feedback from the test screening was that guy playing Joe McCarthy did a great job, but sometimes he was just ranting and screaming and it was hard to watch.
Oh, wow.
Do you have some footage you can use where he's not being a total lunatic?
Probably not.
No, unfortunately, he was way too paranoid for that. I am so curious, and this is totally just a theory of mine. I have no data to back this up whatsoever, but he seemed like he was on some white drugs.
Yeah, it's possible. He always looked sweaty. His hair was never done properly. While he didn't talk super fast sometimes, it certainly looked like something was going on under the surface.
Yeah, he was just so...
Or he was just a heavy
freaked
alcoholic,
out.
which is possible,
Yeah,
too.
that's possible, too. Yeah.
And they also smoked so many freaking cigarettes that he was probably a 2-pack-a-day smoker.
The set often had to empty out because of all the cigarette smoke that they were using
can only
during
imagine.
shooting. Yeah.
And I remember when David Strathairn was nominated for playing Murrow for the Golden Globes that year, and one of the interview questions was, how many cigarettes did you smoke? And he goes, I lost count after day 1 because I was smoking so many herbal cigarettes. And they're like, so did you pick up smoking after? He goes, no, when we wrapped on wrap day, I never picked up another cigarette again. He wasn't a cigarette smoker to begin with,
no.
but those herbal cigarettes, they stink like rotten fucking eggs.
They're
and I used to
awful.
I used to have them on a lot of sets that I would work on, and I will never forget watching an episode of Sons of Anarchy and seeing Katie Seagal sitting at a diner with the pink box of cigarettes, and I was like, Jesus, I know exactly what those smell like. They smell so awful. But I had just kind of gotten into an oral fixation, and I would take a pack at home, and I would smoke them on my balcony, and I would jump in the shower immediately after because I just reeked so bad, even worse than a regular cigarette.
Yes, you'd think that because they're fake, maybe someone would make them where they don't smell as bad, but yes, on set, they're awful.
So bad.
And it's not like they're perfectly healthy for you either.
Exactly, yeah, no, they're just herbal, and herbal doesn't ever mean a safer cigarette.
No, and actors have the choice to smoke what they want, so it can be a real cigarette, it could be one with pipe tobacco, or it can be an herbal cigarette, and it's absolutely their choice, and all of them are gross.
Yes, they are.
But Edward R. Murrow actually would smoke and never exhale he would just swallow it. And so he was a very, very intense
what?
smoker. Yeah, it was really gross.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's disgusting.
A lot of people say it's because he didn't want to show the exhale on TV because it would cloud and not be great. And so he hid it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's
Gross.
ugh.
Yeah. And so for the rest of the movie, we follow as this news team is trying to uncover the true story about McCarthyism and how it's impacting America, how it's creating paranoia between American citizens amongst just each other, and how it goes completely against what the founding fathers wanted for this country. There was a lot of bravery in this story. I'm glad it was turned into a movie so more people can watch it and so more people can learn about it. I think this is an incredibly important story for our times. I'm so glad my mother picked it for this week. I learned a lot, and it was also pretty terrifying. So, John, I know you've seen this movie before, so I think you like it, but I'm so excited to hear what this week's watch was like for you and what your favorite parts of the movie are.
Oh, yeah, let's do it. I am a big fan of this movie. Like I said, I love the cinematography. I thought Strathairn was great. I thought Robert Downey Jr. was awesome. Even Jeff Daniels in the maybe 3.5 minutes that he's on screen, he was great. George Clooney was also awesome. Everybody really delivered in this movie, and I remember seeing it for the first time in Santa Monica. My buddy and I went and saw it, and we left the theater being like, man, I didn't know anything about any of that. Like, I had no idea that any of this happened. So it was an eye-opener then, and it was even more of an eye-opener now because I haven't watched this movie in I want to say at least 10, 12 years. It's been a long time.
Oh, okay.
But I watched it a lot when it first came out on DVD. I think I rented it 3 or 4 different times because I was like, oh, I got to watch that movie again. I don't know why I don't own it because it's definitely a very important piece of history, similar to Monuments Men. I just don't know how often I would watch this movie, but it's a good reminder of what went down, and like you said, especially for what's kind of cracking down right now also. Overall, I would give this movie an A+. I really loved it the first time I saw it, and this rewatch was also very good. The fact that now that I know it was all done on one soundstage is even more impressive for having seen this movie now later on and finding out that information. I thought George Clooney really crafted a fantastic, well, he and Grant Heslov wrote a fantastic script. The dialogue is incredible. It is super sharp. It's to the point. It doesn't linger. It doesn't like try and add bubblegum, if that makes any sense. You know, like it doesn't try to be funny. It just is funny in certain scenarios, not the whole thing. It's obviously not a comedy, but I've caught myself laughing several times this time around. And a lot of secrecy going on in the studio as well between certain characters, which I thought was really cool. Like Monuments Men and any other true story that movies are based off of, the fact that there's authenticity in this movie that George Clooney decided to use actual newsreels of McCarthy is spectacular, because I actually didn't think that it was real watching it this time around. So when you said that, I was like, thank God it was real, because whoever that actor was great. But no, that's really that fucking dude. And he, like you said, just seemed like a complete asshat. And
that's a perfect description.
And there's that other scene where that poor woman is being interrogated about her involvement in the Communist Party, or her boyfriend that might have given money to the party. What's funny is when watching this movie this time around, I'm thinking back to Oppenheimer when it came out last 2 years ago now, and when he was not, quote unquote, a member of the Communist Party, but he went to meetings because he was just fascinated with the whole idea. It's really just it's crazy. And I remember reading Desilu, the Lucille Ball, Desi Arnaz book, and Lucille Ball was accused of being a communist supporter, and just so many people in Hollywood were. There's a line in one of my favorite comedies that Robin Williams, somebody asked, like, oh, you're from Russia? He goes, yes. Do you have a problem with that? I'm not a communist. I mean, I was a part of the party, but I wasn't really a part of the party. It just wasn't for me. So it's crazy how between the time period that Good Night and Good Luck is set, even up until pretty much now, it's like, oh yeah, are you a communist? Do you believe in the Communist Party, etc.? Just, it's so strange. And every time I've Googled communism and just like tried to get myself more knowledge about what the party is, I worry now if I'm ever seized. Like, oh, well, you were Googling the Communist Party. I know, exactly. Yeah, it's like, God damn. But no, great movie, great piece piece of history. Strathairn's fan-freaking-tastic. Yeah, absolutely thumbs-up movie. I think this might be one of George Clooney's better movies as a director. It's not super
agree.
long. Yeah, it's an hour and a half. It gets to the point, and it doesn't add, like I said, it doesn't add the bubblegum. There's not a lot of funniness. There's not even a whole lot of stuff outside of the studio. I loved that about it. It's almost bottle, but not exactly. So I liked that about it, and it's definitely a movie I should very likely just add to my collection. It also made me want to actually YouTube a lot of old Moreau interviews and stuff like that, because the interview that he does with Liberace in the movie, I'm kind of like, huh. Because when it ends, you can tell that Moreau's kind of like, fuck this. Like, this is not what I want to be doing.
Right.
Like, I want to be going after
piece.
people and like bringing
No pun
bringing people
intended.
actual news.
Sorry.
Exactly.
Did not mean to say it like that. But yes, I agree.
It's
with
true,
you.
though. It's
It
true.
is true. It is true. But no shade to Liberace. But I love the connection with Oppenheimer as well, especially because, as you said, not only was he investigated, but Robert Downey Jr. is also in that film, which is a crazy connection. But there's one piece you were talking about that reminded me of a line in this movie that I think is so monumentally important, which is people going to some of these meetings just because they were curious. There's a line in this movie that says, Russia used to be our ally. Of course I went to meetings or knew communists during World War II. And then McCarthy's trying to use that against everyone. It's like, dude, we were at war and they fought with us against Nazism. What are you talking about?
Yeah, he was so stupid.
And I think that's such a stark reminder for everyone that it's not that these people were, they weren't being careful and they were friends with commies in the 50s. No. It was that they knew people in the 40s when we were supposed to be friends with Russia.
Right. So insane.
So dumb. So yes, I'm so glad you liked it. I think you articulated everything I love about the movie too, so thank you so much for that.
Oh yeah.
And we're not the only ones who love this film. I'm going to get into that in a couple minutes. But first I want to talk a little bit about the BTS for this movie. First and foremost, George Clooney. I wasn't a big fan of him in the 90s. I was way too young to think he was hot in ER, and so I just didn't care at all. But I do respect him as a man and as an actor and now a director because of our work on the podcast and different movies I've seen of his over the last 20 years. As an actor, we've discussed him before because he was in Burn After Reading, your pick.
Yes.
And Syriana, which came out the same year, he won an Oscar for it at the 2006 Academy Awards.
That's right. He is an Oscar winner.
He is. He also starred in Three Kings, Out of Sight, From Dusk Till Dawn, since I mentioned it last week for Sinners.
Yes.
And your wife's favorite Batman movie of Batman and Robin that he always apologizes for.
Yes, he does. And I think that's so funny too because 2 years ago he made a cameo in The Flash, which was hysterical.
That was a great cameo though.
Yes, it was. It was awesome. Who the fuck is this guy?
And as a director, he has also headed up the movies Leatherheads.
Oh, yeah.
The Ides of March and Boys...
Never saw that one.
I didn't either, but I want to, especially because Ryan Gosling's in it.
I've heard it's really good.
Yeah, and The Boys in the Boat.
Oh, that's right. That was last year.
Yeah.
Or the year before. It was with... Was it 2 years ago already? Wow. I saw the trailer and I didn't care, but I feel like I would watch it at home and have a decent time with it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those feel-good stories. It actually made me feel a little bit, the trailer at least, made me think of Disney live-action movies that are super uplifting, like last week's episode.
Yeah, there you go. I think my least favorite movie that he's in is an Alexander Payne movie called The Descendants. I think that movie is absolutely an atrocity. And I have actually made people hate that movie after they've claimed that they've loved it because I've explained it to them. And similar to La La Land, I've changed people's minds. It can be done. So if you need your mind changed, come to me.
You're doing God's work. But I am. I think George Clooney actually excels at political thrillers. I think you should just do more of those.
Oh, yeah. I completely agree.
And to create this film, each morning, George Clooney would gather his cast members together and give them copies of the newspapers from that day in 1953.
Oh, that's cool.
He'd give them an hour and a half working on old manual typewriters to copy out the stories from the paper, and then they would hold an improvised news conference with all of the actors reporting on whatever news story they chose.
That is awesome. Oh man, to be on that set, that would have been so much fun.
Such a cool exercise.
Hell yeah, that is badass.
And one very important aspect of this film that we have not discussed at all, we haven't even mentioned it yet, I can't believe it's been this long, and we haven't talked about the fact that this movie is in black and white.
Yes, it is.
The film was shot on color film on a grayscale set,
Oh.
desaturated in post-production, and released on black and white print stock.
Wow.
So he was
very cool.
very purposeful.
Yeah.
And precisely every 23 minutes, which is the standard running time of television shows from the 50s, the film is broken up by a jazz song performed by Diane Reeves.
Oh, love those moments in
Me
this movie
too.
so much.
Me too. She reminded me of the jazz singer in The Whole Nine Yards, actually.
Oh, yeah.
She was great. I'm really glad they added that in.
That was pretty sweet.
And the catchphrase, good night and good luck, which is the title of this film, was actually a habit by Edward R. Murrow. He said that all the time, especially at the end of his news broadcasts. And he started it when he was in London as a war reporter during World War II, and he said it over the radio every night at the end of his show. British people, under constant night bombing by the Germans, would then start ending their conversations with the same words because they were unsure of when they would meet their friends and family again.
Oh, wow.
I want you to guess, given the stacked cast, I want you to guess the budget of this film.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Budget of the film, 2005. I'm going to go with $65 million.
This movie was made for $7.5 million.
Ha, 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 ha. What the hell? Are you kidding me?
Nope.
That is insane.
It is. Now, granted, this was before Robert Downey Jr.'s comeback. This was before Iron Man, but this cast is absolutely stacked. George Clooney paid himself $1 each for writing, directing, and starring in the film.
Wow.
He mortgaged his own home in Los Angeles to help raise the film's budget.
Wow.
And apparently all of his buddies who were cast in it were okay with taking, what do you think? They were okay with doing,
each?
Per diem or something?
Yeah, maybe.
Union minimum.
Wow. That's wild.
Clearly a passion project. And he was refused insurance due to a back injury he incurred while making Syriana.
No kidding.
And because of that injury, he decided to have 2 cameras rolling at the same time on set to cut the working day in half.
Oh, my gosh.
These were only 9-hour days.
Oh, my gosh.
Dream
Incredible. Yeah.
All on one soundstage, 9-hour days. Let's get this done.
Wow.
Other than the fake cigarette smoke, I'm so totally on board.
Absolutely.
And on a $7.5 million budget, it made $32 million in the United States.
Nice.
And $55 million worldwide.
Very good.
It was nominated for 6 Oscars. Best Art Direction, which totally makes sense that they built that set from scratch.
Hell yeah.
Best Cinematography for Robert Elswit, who I discussed.
Mm-hmm.
Best Original Screenplay, Best Directing, Best Performance by an Actor in a Leading Role for David Strathairn, and Best Picture.
Wow.
Unfortunately, it won none of those because that was the year that Crash won, and also Walk the Line came out, and Brokeback Mountain.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And Philip Seymour Hoffman won Best Actor for Capote that year.
Oh, okay. Well, that's deserved.
Yeah, that made sense. That was fair. And it was the first Best Picture nominee to be in black and white since Schindler's List.
Oh, wow.
And lastly, George Clooney was extremely nervous about showing the film to his father, Nick. Nick Clooney was a newsman. And when the film was over, Nick got up, patted his son on the shoulder, and said, "You got it right."
Very cool.
And that is Good Night and Good Luck, my mother's pick for this year's Mother's Day. Thank you so much. It is a phenomenal film. Everyone should watch it, especially in these times. Unfortunately, it's not streaming anywhere, but is absolutely worth every penny because you can rent it from any streaming service right now.
I ended up buying it for $6.99 on Apple because I'd rather spend $6.99 than $3.99 and rent it for 48 hours. So I now own it on 4K on Apple streaming.
Brilliant. So, John, would you watch The Monuments Men with your mother?
Oh, yeah, I definitely would. If my mom ever wants to put it on when I'm over at the house, just crack a bottle of wine and watch The Monuments Men.
Awesome.
And V, would you watch Good Night and Good Luck with your mom?
Absolutely. And my father, he would love this film.
Oh, yeah. My parents have seen Good Night and Good Luck, and they are big fans of it as well.
Oh, good. It's a great political thriller. It reminded me a lot of 13 Days and All the President's Men.
Yeah, definitely.
Which were our picks for last Thanksgiving's episode of Political Thrillers.
Wow, was that long ago, huh?
Yeah, several months.
Time is flying.
I don't want to talk about it.
Neither do I.
This is the last year we can be over 30 short for 40.
I know.
So thank you, moms. We will happily continue with this tradition next year, so stay tuned for that. And John, do you want to tell all our audience what we're doing next week?
Yeah, let's do it. We are jumping into our 3-year anniversary here at Movies You Miss podcast, so we are going to be coming at you in threes. We are choosing the third of some of our favorite franchises. So, V, why don't you let our audience know what trilogy you have gone with?
I'm happy to. I'm so excited to pick a third movie from a trilogy for our 3-year anniversary, and I can't believe we're already hitting 3 years. I decided to go with a film that I love, and I also picked the original for our first Christmas ever.
Yeah, you did.
Because I picked Die Hard 3, Die Hard with a Vengeance, starring Bruce Willis and Jeremy Irons.
Sweet.
And Samuel L. Jackson. Can't forget him.
Oh, all right. Awesome.
And you've never seen it.
I have not seen Die Hard 3, Die Hard with a Vengeance, or however you want
It's just Die Hard with a Vengeance, but I just call
Okay.
it Die Hard 3 because it's a trilogy. All good.
There we go.
I'm so excited to introduce you to this movie. And John, what third movie did you pick?
I picked a third movie that really should have just been the second movie because we don't ever talk about the second movie because it's so awful.
Agreed.
But I did choose the original way back in January of 2024, so just over a year ago. I'm going with a film from 2012 starring Will Smith, Tommy Lee Jones, and Josh Brolin. This is Men in Black 3, everybody.
Hell yeah. We finally got around to doing this movie.
Yeah, we did. It is not streaming on anything, unfortunately. You can rent it, though, on Prime or Apple for $3.99. I will definitely watch my Blu-ray copy, even though I just watched Men in Black 3 less than a month ago when I was in Los Angeles with my buddy Joel. It is a rewatchable movie, and if you have not seen it, you will understand. And if you have seen it, you understand.
Yes.
So that is what we will be doing next week. Super excited to get into these films.
Yes, very excited to celebrate our 3-year anniversary together.
Hell yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in this week for the Mother's Day episode. We hope you had a lovely Mother's Day with whatever mother figure in your life you could celebrate with. Special shout out to Susan and Terry, our moms, for participating in this episode. Thank you for continuing this tradition. Really appreciate it.
Yes.
And until our next episode, please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. Share this podcast with your mothers.
Yeah, please do.
Especially your mothers who don't care about swearing.
And if they like movies.
Especially if they like movies. And until next week, we love to end this podcast with film is a form of art, and in art, every opinion is valid. Except if you think...
Moms don't like George Clooney.
Just put all the moms on blast. I love it.
Yep, why not?
I mean, we just proved it in this episode, so I'm right there with you.
That's true.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and until next week, bye-bye.
Good night and good luck.